Everyone's here, we can't blame anyone else.
Thank you. Item 5.2.3 is the East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C126, implementation of the Paintsville Maritime Precinct Master Plan. And we have some speakers or verbal presentations tonight. And the first one, Mr. CEO.
The first one is Mr. Philip Munn.
Would you like to come forward, Mr. Munn? Thank you, Mr. Munn. Just press the... Thank you.
No worries. G'day, how's going?
Good.
I've never done this before, so if I stuff up, I apologise. I just put my glasses on so I can't see. No, I'm good at printing pens. There's only a couple of us speaking, but there's a lot of the stakeholders here, right back there, and there's a few that can't make it because they've got commitments they couldn't get out of. And I think that reflects on how serious everyone's taken this. So now I'll start where I'm going to start. The marine industry has been in Paintsville for over 100 years, and it'll be here for the next 100. No one is trying to remove it. So one has to ask who or what is driving this amendment C126 and is so hell-bent on pushing this through for the Shire to adopt it with total disregard for the vast majority of the stakeholders who only want the flexibility to run small business and or build premises other than marine. Surely other small business that coexist with the marine industry would only bring extra income into Paintsville and can't pose a credible threat to the marine industry. I'm opposed to Slip Road being marine-only industry for the following reasons. The Paintsville Marine Precinct Master Plan is 9 years old and out of date. The last standalone factory to be completed was built around 2009. Since then, there have been 3 factory caretakers' residences built, to which now the council is opposed. Since 2009, infrastructure in the master plan, nothing's been implemented. In the Paintsville area, there are shipwrights, boat repairs, marine mechanics, marine fabricators, sail makers, canopy and upholstery trimmers, all successfully working in the marine trade from home-based businesses with little or no overheads, and have been doing so for years. To date, these businesses have not purchased land or factories in Slip Road, and why would they when they don't need to? The master plan promotes the Paintsville Marine Industry Association, PMIA, and credits its launch for a feasibility study for the Centre of Wooden Boats, underground power in Slip Road, and organising a major boat show. The PMA folded approximately 7 to 8 years ago due to lack of interest. And that's a conservative estimate. Some think it was more like 9 to 10, but I'll put down 7 to 8. Could it be that the same lack of interest is why the 2009 master plan has not been acted on until now, only because time's running out? To implement Slip Road as a marine marine-only precinct will grossly devalue the existing properties in the street while making it almost impossible to sell them, therefore causing financial hardship to the owners. As landowners, we should be allowed to sell our properties to anyone who wants to develop light industry. And purchasers should be able to get a planning permit from the council to be able to run his business as long as it isn't heavy industry or obnoxious. If and when the marine industry manages to expand and requires more land, existing properties can be purchased as demand dictates. Gippsland Ports grabbed a large majority of the marine work. With their push for private boat works and retail sales, they have the policy or the plan to be the the one-stop shop. They have the travel lift. They get first crack at all the work. There is no other commercial estates in Paintsville for non-marine businesses to develop. Where am I? Something else in the council agenda for tonight. The executive summary under process states the most prominent of the submissions is the desire to use land in the precinct for unrestricted industrial and residential use. I believe this to be totally incorrect. No one is saying they want unrestricted industrial and unrestricted residential use. I do believe that existing properties should have some rights, including the right to rebuild their property if it's damaged by storm, fire, flood, etc. Let's get a little bit of water. When Lynn and I got our planning permit, I was told by senior town planners, this is exactly what we want. A street full of these would be fantastic. Bernie Ryan was told the same thing when he built his. Phil Henderson was told the same thing when he built his. So I urge the councillors to vote no to clause C120, to vote no to 126 clause 2205. And I've sort of buggered that up a bit because it's halfway in here as well. Also, in a statement to you or the agenda,
yep.
I think it says in there that there's 15 people for this, and I think it's 3 against. Is that right? 3 or 5? I can't remember what it is. 3? No, sorry. Yeah, there's 15 to shut it down. There's 3 for it. Sorry. Now, well, why I bring that up for is 12 of us was confused the way this letter that came out was written. And it goes on to say, it says that after we went to that meeting when we saw you all, that she's written down our complaint, and it says that the specific marine zone is too restrictive and not justified. Then talks about the caretaker's residence. We're saying it would be good for the streetscape and all that sort of stuff. And it says in here, retain industrial 3 zone. This is their response, the council's response. It says, in response to your concerns and others raised, the amendment is proposed to be altered and now proposes to do the following. Retain industrial 3 zone and therefore abandon the proposal to rezone land to a special use zone. Now, 11 others, and myself included, thought, beauty, it's all over and done with. Put the piece of paper, put it on your desk, let's get on with work and business or whatever. And it was only until someone else twigged and pointed it out, and they said, oh, have you read dot point new clause 22. And it says in here, amend the local planning policy at clause 21, insert new clause 2205. And when you go into 2205, it's saying that stick by the master plan, nothing else but marine only. That's basically my summary of it. But, you know, like I could read it all out, but it'll take forever. 2205 just backs up the Paintsville master plan. So on the first page, they're saying it's all done and dusted. Second page, it's saying they're going to like bring it in anyhow. So I've got a couple of letters here that I think that they've been emailed, whether they've all come through or not. Look, if I can just read them out. It says the first one's from Red.
We've received it. We've got them all.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you got? I don't think have you got the one from Isa Smith?
Yeah.
You saw that one? Okay. Has he got the one from Cam Bounds? Got that one too. Good. So that takes it to about, I don't know, 19 to 1. I think it works out to. Anyhow, what I was going to say, what I buggered it up, we urge the councillors to vote no to clause 126, clause 2205, and keep Slip Road open to all, non-offensive light industrial with factory caretakers' residences, and don't send it to another panel wasting more money. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Munn.
No worries.
We now have
Mr. Bernie Ryan.
Bernie Ryan. Bernie.
Now, no way known am I going to be even as good as Phil. But anyway, we won't worry about that, will we, boys and girls? To the councillors and council officers, my name's Bernie Ryan. I don't know whether you people are all aware of me. I live in Slip Road. I've got a bit of a different house and I think a bit differently outside the square. But anyway, I have 3 blocks of land there. A vacant one where my house is and one where the factories are. We came here in 2002 and the marine industry has changed a lot since then. There's less wooden boats, and this is where a lot of the work comes from. And Paintsville used to be the dumping place for wooden boats from Sydney and places like that, and that's what was actually happening. Well, now the wooden boats are moving out of Paintsville, and I don't know where they're going, but anyway, it could be the tip or wherever. But there's getting less and less of wooden boats and bigger and better boats. There's better engines, and you can I'll take the example of Bull's Cruisers now. They used to have a lot of old timber boats and what have you. They've got no wooden boats whatsoever, and they've got less of them, so the market's going down on that. It's too cheap. They fly to Bali or somewhere for a cruise on the lakes for a weekend. Boat bits is gone. This is just little industries that are going on there. Boat bits is gone. And when I went there, I was told to build small factories. You can rent them out. You know, small businesses will take that if they're in the repair game. Well, I built one factory, divided it into 4, and I didn't get one. Not one small industry. The only one I got was a panel beater, and I got told, well, you can't have panel beaters there. It's got to be marine related. And I said, oh, he's going to paint boats. All right, we'll tick that then. And that's how he came to be there. That's true. Now, he looks like going in 12 months because the whole panel industry has changed. It's all become bigger. GP Motors, whatever it is in Bairnsdale's taken it all. The RACV, I'm getting off that anyway. Now, might be news to you, but the Honda dealership has shifted out of Paintsville. I spoke to him about shifting in where the panel beater is. He said, oh, I don't know about that. I only heard a front office. He said, if I was going to shift anywhere, I'd rather shift to Bairnsdale and be on the main highway where you're getting a lot of traffic. Most small operators, as Phil said, they work out of trailers from home and don't need to be in Slip Road. And I'll go back, going over things again. When I built my house, the head planner of the Shire told me that That's what Slip Road wants. Architecturally designed houses, houses in front of their sheds or businesses along Slip Road that would be more pleasurable to the eye from the water. And he's quite right. If you go along the water there and look at the bloody mess, and I was one of the ones that had a mess till the Shire made me clean it up, but anyway, that's another story. But I would think better housing along the front with the businesses. They're only house blocks at the end of the day anyway. You can't do anything major there. Now, in one of these letters or in part of the council plan goals states advanced planning that provides community members and landowners with certainty about the way the land is used and developed. Now, you all ought to have a good think about that, because marine related down there mightn't be the best way for the community to use some of that. It might be a bridge over a pedestrian bridge over the canal, and you move part of the town down there as a restaurant or whatever have you. In the 15 or 16 years I've been in Slip Road, no new businesses have been chasing land. In fact, 3 marine-related businesses have started up in Paintsville, and the fourth, being and this was just one that I just twigged onto, being a fiberglass boat manufacturer, has shifted from Paintsville to Bairnsdale. Now, we get into a bit of a tricky one here. In the council submission, Gippsland Ports is critical to the growth, and they've all done to make it more difficult for the small operators. And I mean making it more difficult is they have the travel lift, they have the first bite of the cherry, they run a retail store there themselves. You can go and buy your anodes there, cheaper than what you can up at Boat Bits or whatever they call themselves today. Resin for materials, cheaper than you can buy it in Bairnsdale or anywhere else, and things like that. And one example was when Jotun Paints took them to court over it. We had a little court case, but it didn't turn out too good. But anyway, the plan's 10 years old, and lots changed since then. The zone's too restrictive, but the policy is. The plan is not too restrictive, but the policy is. The master plan put up to council now is the same stuff in this here on a different plate but the same shit. Now, what I mean by that is what Phil said at the end of the thing. At the end of the thing is there, we got the things. Oh, they're going to go for houses along here and a few other things there, and oh, here we got what we wanted. Threw it in the corner. Phil comes along and says, "Have you read this over here clause? Whatever the clause number was there." I go, "What?" What it was putting back in everything they said they were going to take out. Roundabout way. I note over time the improvements anticipated through the master plan for the foreshore and this section of the public foreshore result in a new community benefit. If you read through the reports in the reports, you'll see the new community benefit. I wonder what that'd be. Anyhow, a bit more reading, and I could read into this that the Gippsland Ports want to expand on the public land. They're already on public land. They want more public land. I've been told in discussions with the CEO of Ports that they're there for public benefit, because I got into a bit of an argument with him because people in my factories, or what I was trying to get in the factories and the other ones there, they can work at a cheaper rate in the ports because they're not paying a proper rent to the state government. So he says they're there for public benefit. Now, when we came here, the government tried to privatise them, and that's about 15 years ago, and I'd have to go back and chase into a bit of that. There were no value. There were no takers. The value of the infrastructure, land, etc., was no way relevant to the income produced. And I'd still say it's the same today. If you added up how much the value of everything was there and all the men and all the things there, they might be getting 1% on their money. And we're paying for that as taxpayers, and we're also paying for it having factories outside there trying to compete against them. It's not a level playing field. The business outside trying to... the Gippsland Ports are always saying they're there for a community benefit. Summing up, I believe there's push by Gippsland Ports and not the stakeholders in Slip Road. At the end of the day, mixed use is a zone that should be there, I think, which gives us a lot of things to play with, and not, if you put in the mixed zone, not putting 22 22.05 inserted into the zone master plan, which is what we've got today. If you want to ask me anything about that afterwards or any time there, I'm quite happy to fill you in on where I get, not where I got the information from, but where I found it and stuff like that.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernie. Is there any others? Okay. Ms. Nelson, who's talking on this one?
Thank you, councillors. Once again, this is a report dealing with a planning scheme amendment and council in its role as the planning authority. So the process, I guess, that the planning authority, the key purpose of council's role as a planning authority is to support good decision making, to make it in a way that generates the most benefit to the community. And part of that involves council planning for the future and forecasting the future, and using the planning scheme tools to make sure that we're actually able to get the outcomes that we believe are important for our community. So Paintsville is growing and recognising that growth is happening and planning for that, and appropriate economic activity is part of the role of the planning authority. Burrabuggy Island and Slip Road, the Slip Road area is a key part of town that has a significant role in supporting recreational boating infrastructure. It's got key locational and economic advantages when you look at the combination of both the public and private land and the access to the waterfront in that location. And that vision is captured by the Precinct Master Plan that we're talking about tonight. A key way to implement the outcomes of the Master Plan and that vision is to ensure that the way that the planning scheme is amended supports good decision making over time on a site-by-site basis, so that the overall objective of the precinct can be achieved. By putting the controls in the planning scheme, it means that council has the ability to make fair and transparent decisions about land use in this part of the municipality, and that the outcomes that have been sought and agreed to through the planning scheme amendment process are clear when it comes to making subsequent decisions. Do we always get agreement on the best outcomes or the ways that the scheme might be used to do this? No, we don't. And that's why the planning scheme amendment process is like it is. It is the way it is, because there are significant processes and checks and balances when we look at changing the way that people can use and develop their land. So in this case, council's worked with the community and stakeholders to prepare the master plan for the precinct. That was adopted by council. Council's twice considered the proposal to pursue a planning scheme amendment and exhibit it. It's been exhibited, and comments both in favour and opposing have been received. We've considered those, so gone through an extra process to understand the submissions and try to see how we can respond to those. And we're now asking council to consider a revised approach to the amendment, and importantly, whether or not to pursue the amendment at this time or refer the submissions to an independent panel, or alternatively abandon the amendment either wholly or in part. So the planning scheme process includes a number of opportunities for people to get involved in the process, people who have an interest in the outcome. There's a number of review points both by council and the Minister for Planning, including the opportunity to refer matters to an independent panel appointed by the Minister to provide council with advice prior to you having to finally determine how you would like to see this matter progress through the planning scheme. In this case, the planning scheme amendment proposes a range of changes to the scheme to support the implementation of the Precinct Master Plan. The element that appears to have caused most concern based on our assessment is the concerns presented by people who own land currently zoned Industrial 3 in the precinct. And, you know, we started out with this proposal, and yes, it's taken time to design the controls and get permission from the Minister to actually progress the amendment in the format that we first exhibited, because it's not a straightforward process to simply get authorisation to exhibit an amendment. Where we started with was with a special use zone designed specifically to support applications being made for marine-related industry. It was a zone different to the industrial 3 zone because it limited the range of things that people could do to things that might realistically be supported in a marine industrial precinct. We've changed the proposal presented today to retain the current industrial 3 zone. The distinction between there's a significant distinction between the zones and the way they control applications that can even be made for consideration by council. So it opens up the range of things that people can apply for in the industrial 3 zone compared to the special use zone. But we are still proposing that there be policy to support good decision making on a case-by-case basis. And if you look at the words in there, it's not explicit about what can or can't happen. It is designed, the policy is designed to guide the discretion that council exercises, either council itself or delegates, so planning officers, in understanding the range of uses that might be appropriately justified to go into that area, whether they are marine or not. So it remains as a industrial 3 zone. We don't believe that the amendment should be, as officers, don't believe it should be adopted if we can't retain significant portions of that policy, because that is the justification that supports the amendment and the future decision making, whether it's about marine industrial, marine tourism and public land development. I guess the proposal that's being put to you today is about a comprehensive and integrated approach to improving the planning controls in this part of the precinct. The concern relates primarily to the industrial land. And we remain of the view that protection and enhancement of the Maritime precinct and supporting the recreational boating activity in Paintsville does represent a significant strategic land use outcome that provides benefits not only to the town but for the region. The proposal before council is not proposing a marine-only precinct, and there would appear to be a lack of understanding about how the controls will be used by council to exercise that discretion. And I understand that these things are technical and complex, but happy to elaborate on that if councillors would like. But I think the key point here is that the process to date has elicited submissions both in favour and against the proposal. So there are different views in the community about how this matter should be dealt with. And given that's the case, then officers are of the view that the most appropriate approach for council to take is to refer all of the submissions received to an independent panel. The panel process enables councils and submitters to present their position on the proposal and take independent advice on the most appropriate way to proceed in the circumstances. The independent panel is established to set up to hear everybody's perspective on the proposal, and they make a recommendation to council. They don't tell council what conclusion they should come to. That report would be re-presented to council, where you would have a further opportunity to determine what the final position is that council would like to take in the context of advice about all of those matters. So our recommendation is that you refer the submissions to the panel. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms Nelson. Questions? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ms Nelson, just perhaps for my benefit and some of the others around the table, in in plain terms, this what was discussed before of clause 21 and insert new clause 2205. What will that actually produce? Does it make it more restrictive still?
I think the distinction that needs to be made here is that the starting point was a zone, a special use zone, which is very specifically about what you can do as of right, so without a planning permit, what you need a permit for, and what would be prohibited in the zone. So it would limit some proposals that would be currently allowed in the Industrial 3 zone. What we're proposing is to stick with the current zone, so no change to the zone, but to provide council and the community with transparent advice about the overall precinct and the policy that would be used to exercise discretion. It's not explicit about what can or can't happen, but it provides guidance about the types of land uses that might be preferred, but it enables council to accept applications and exercise discretion about what would be approved on a case-by-case basis.
Councillor Roberts, you had a question, then Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Nelson, at one of our briefing sessions, we had a discussion about taking it away from a rezoning and making it a referral document, for lack of a better word. When it was discussed, it was indicated that it would still be preferential to maritime generally. So it would be still a maritime guided area. However, there was the possibility to put in a application to have other applications considered. What would be a trigger that would be approved by the planning department?
Oh, that's I guess a theoretical question. I'm not sure I can actually answer that exactly. But if you look at the wording in the policy around marine industries, it talks about, for example, to ensure that industrial land in the maritime precinct is not unnecessarily occupied by non-maritime users. So, at the moment, there's no alternative industrial land in Paintsville. So if a use was proposed, then the officers would have to consider what the alternative options are for that landowner and determine whether this was unnecessarily occupying the industrial land in this precinct. The language is around adequate, are not unnecessarily define and consider. It provides guidance for officers to exercise discretion. It is not a black and white rule about what you can or cannot apply for, and it's designed like that because we don't know what circumstances might be put to council. Caretakers' dwellings continue to be allowed in the Industrial 3 zone. So, the view that is being put that, something is significantly changing in respect to caretakers' dwellings and whether they have a role in the precinct hasn't changed. The distinction is that it allows council to, rather than preventing things being applied for, it allows council to exercise discretion on a case-by-case basis.
Councillor Roberts, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you. So being that there is no other industrial zone land in Paintsville, would any light industrial application be permitted until a time that there was additional industrial zone land?
I can't say that because I can't say yes because I don't know what the circumstances are or what's being applied for, but I can say that if it fits in the Industrial 3 zone, then someone can make an application and it can be considered in the light of all of the considerations that we would normally put applicants through.
Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Katie, I just want to get my wording right here. So 2205 is the sticking point that's been referred to, the insertion of 2205. And 2205 is a local planning policy, the Paintsville Maritime Precinct Master Plan. There's a bit of discussion around it being a bit old. It's referenced from 2009 or even earlier. There's some concerns around existing use, and you've just mentioned then that any planning application would be based on a reference to, not guided by, referring to that particular document. And I think we've heard from various community members that there's a change and a shift in use. And is this master plan too rigid at the moment? And that's the problem I think that I'm hearing from the community members, that that at some point in the future, if we adopt this, there might be a discretionary view from somebody who we don't know yet, who might say this is the policy and the proposal doesn't fit into this particular policy, so you can't do it. How can we have that flexibility and still have the intentions?
I think one planning minister one time said that we were going to have certainty with flexibility in the planning system, and
Okay, right.
I'm not sure. Look, it's I guess the way you try and achieve that is by being clear about what the development outcome is that you would like to achieve through policy, and you design the tools to provide guidance so that when officers receive applications which we can't possibly anticipate might come in, that there's sufficient guidance there to be flexible and reasonable about what the outcome is. So, you know, we use the combination of policy and zone controls to exercise good judgment about what should happen in particular zones, and we use the zones as a tool for deciding what people can or can't apply for. Policy is that thing a good thing or not? So in every zone there are things that you're allowed to do without a permit, there are things that you need a permit for, and there are things that are prohibited, and the combination of the zone land use controls and the policy is how we get the flexibility.
Yep.
The policy in the master plan provides a level of strategic certainty about the outcomes that we're looking for, but the outcomes are achieved through site-by-site decisions.
Yep, and then an interpretation of 2205
Yes.
by somebody, and that's maybe the point that I'm struggling with a bit.
And unlike with
How do we remove that discretion and put more flexibility, or if that's what I'm saying?
well, as officers, I think we're basically saying, and having regard for all of the views that have been put, that we have created some more flexibility by removing the special use zone and relying only on policy to guide discretionary decision making, rather than being explicit about what people can or can't apply for, being linked directly to the maritime industry, whether it's tourism or boating or other things. So what we're saying, maybe I'm saying it in a kind of messy way, but we believe that we have built that flexibility into the process. I don't believe that we would be successful in progressing a planning scheme amendment if we were to lose too much of that local planning policy, because it doesn't provide anyone with any guidance about what we're looking for to happen in this part of Paintsville. And you'll notice the policy at 2205 does deal with the broader vision for the precinct. It's not just about the industrial land, it's about the way that this precinct is facilitated and protected into the future. And, you know, you just have to look at how hard it is to get this through. Sure, the plan is old, but we've had the economic justification for it reviewed, and that was presented to council when we met in Paintsville. So the economic justification for this, the locational advantage of this precinct in the context of the growth in in recreational boating activity and its function and contribution to the economy in Paintsville, like that's a sound basis on which to proceed. The industry itself might be changing. I don't think, you know, I'm not going to dispute what people who are working in the industry are saying, but this isn't all about boat builders. This is about tourism opportunities. It's about, you know, depending on how creative people can be about what you can do that links to and makes a more vibrant recreational boating precinct, we're basically saying let's be really careful about how we use this nearby. I don't know where you'll find another location where you can promote and support recreational boating activity. It's not all about boat building and boat fixing. It's about boat related tourism and other things.
Councillor O'Connell, you had a question?
That was a long,
very long.
It follows on from Councillor Reeves really, but taking to consideration what Mr Munn and Mr Ryan spoke about, that in 9 years we haven't seen any real development in the industry. It's changed. So are we sure that this precinct will actually be needed going forward, given that in almost 10 years we haven't seen that private investment come in, we haven't seen that sort of thing develop? So we're putting a lot of eggs into one basket.
Yeah, look, I understand the concerns of the landowners. I mean, we don't change the planning scheme for no good reason. And that's partly why we're recommending that we refer these the submissions of the proposal to an independent panel. Let's have someone independent have a look at it. The reality is that the Shire of Bairnsdale had a policy in their planning scheme which started this whole concept of the Maritime Precinct here. It was part of the original vision for Burrabogie Island when it was created by the canal construction, by the location historically of the slip yard and the boat ramp and the other things that happen in this part of town. This concept isn't new, and as you know from the site inspection we did, there's a lot of boat-related activity happening already in this precinct. That hasn't just happened by accident. Sure, the demand might be different at the moment, but what we're really saying is in your planning authority role, we need to be conscious of making sure that we don't lose future opportunities here. Yes, at the moment there's no alternative industrial land, but we're the closest we've ever been to having that alternative. And the lining up of this process with other future planning for Paintsville puts us in the best position that we've ever been to achieve both those outcomes for Paintsville.
Councillor Pearls, you had a question?
Ms Nelson, just wanting you to highlight the advantages to the Slip Road residents or owners, what the benefits will be for them should we adopt this tonight.
I guess it depends on your view here, because there are landowners in Slip Road who are in support of this proposal. So they think there's value in focusing our energy on making sure that this area develops as a marine-related precinct, whether it's on the private land or the public land, because there are a number of initiatives here, not just what happens in the industrial land. If you don't think that there's enough flexibility built into the proposal that we've presented tonight, then you might not be in favour of it from an industrial land use perspective. And the fact that there are those two quite different views says to me that we should refer this to an independent panel, and we should get that advice before we finalise this proposal and have council formally form a view about whether this has got merit or not.
Certainly, Councillor Pearls, and Councillor Ellis has a question
Just
as well.
in regards to that then, so I've spoken specifically about the owners of the land there. So what actual benefit will it have to the broader community of Paintsville and East Gippsland should we accept this?
Well, there's a number of benefits in that from a public land perspective, we're confirming the tourism and open space and other plans that we have out of the master plan. There are a number of, in terms of the economic benefit to Paintsville and the economic contribution that boat-related activity, whether it's tourism or marine-related, has a significant contribution to Paintsville and to people who work there. It basically means that Paintsville can really, if we allow this to go ahead as is, really genuinely be seen as the recreational boating capital of the Gippsland Lakes. So it's a massive marketing exercise. It's an attractor for people who want to live here. It offers by the water support to tourists and other people visiting the area. There's a whole range of benefits. The challenge here is that the local landowners don't necessarily view it as bringing the same benefit. So what I'm saying is, let's have someone evaluate whether this has got merit or not.
Councillor Ellis, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just got a number of things that have been running through my head as a result of the detailed response Ms Nelson's been able to provide us with this. But we still haven't been able to get over a number of the questions that the residents of Slip Road, the business or residential, have raised to us. And these are questions that must come back to us as decision makers, Mr Mayor, not perhaps to a panel. So I'm still very uncomfortable. So my questions are this. I've been reading 2205 and going back over the policy or the plan. Can you explain to me clearly what is the boogeyman in 22.05 that has got our community so concerned about? What is the actual words? I didn't hear Mr Ryan or Mr Munns actually say what it was. They just referred to it as a trap, and so I'd like some explanation for a start as a first question, please.
You'd like me to explain that? Yeah, well, I don't know exactly, but I'm assuming it is the section that's headed marine industries. So there are 4 in marine industries. In 2204, there's a heading, marine industries, on page 220 of your document. 4 dot points that would be used by planning officers as part of their consideration of any application for land use or development in the precinct. So it still links it back to the overall precinct, but and there's some general words at the beginning, but I suspect it's that component of the because you can see that the other things are, well, generally about promoting economic employment activities, integrating the precinct into the wider town. You know, they're all good planning principles. For boating users, I don't think there's anything particularly detrimental there in terms of, you know, recognising development around boat launching facilities and the kind of things that both the boating community is going to want to access. And quite specifically, there are some tourism initiatives contained in the master plan as well. I don't think any of those things are particularly. I don't think any of the other things are particularly worrying. It's about industry-related activity, I suspect. But the wording is written in a policy sense. It's not rules, it's policy. Policy provides guidance on exercising discretion.
Is there a follow-up question?
Yeah, there is. So with that explanation, is there any threat, therefore, for the to the activities and the businesses that are being carried on there now? Are the objectives that we've outlined in 2205.3 in direct conflict with the activities that are carried on in the precinct as is, or in the current time?
In the precinct, the zone is not changing, so any land use that's allowed to be in that zone is legally in that zone. There's no change as a result of this planning scheme amendment. So people, you know, in the previous proposal with the special use zone, there was more risk that some things would become non-conforming uses. We've eliminated the situation where more of those things would become non-conforming uses. So there's a benefit in the way that we've changed from the special use zone, shifted away from the special use zone and retained the current zone. There is no change to the zone or to existing uses in that zone.
Further question?
So many, I'm just not sure where to go. I think I might move to the concept of adopting an approach on panel and ask, I'll put it this way, in a tender process, in the assessment of a tender, various aspects of the tender are weighted and given a value. In the considerations of a panel, is there a weighting for community concern or community opposition to a particular policy or plan brought before that panel? Is it held in a higher level than perhaps just general conversation as a start?
I doubt there's anything that explicit. There's a hierarchy of planning principles that a planning panel would have to give consideration to, the state policy, how this proposal actually works to advance the planning objectives of Victoria. There's a whole range of things that they would have to consider. The process specifically recognises the role of submitters to the process. We wouldn't. The process wouldn't allow anyone who has an interest to make a submission to this, wouldn't do that if we weren't interested in understanding how people were impacted by it. With any planning process and objection, it's not about numbers, it's about the substance of the submissions made, whether for or against, and that's what the planning panel will be trying to weigh up. What is the substance of what is being told to us here? Are the planning officers off on the wrong track because we haven't recognised, that the industry's changed? Are we being unrealistic about the way this land might be used into the future? Is there justification for providing this policy context for making decisions here in Paintsville at the moment? So they're the questions that they would have to answer. It's about substance, not numbers or who's made the submission. It's about what's the substance of what's been put to the panel.
Councillor Reeves, do you have a question? Yeah, I'll come back to you.
It's about the planning panel as well, and about getting an independent view. Thank you. About the planning panels getting independent view. The planning panel will make recommendations about C126, not 2205. Is that correct? Because C2205 seems to be the sticking point and some content therein. So yeah. Can we refer this without adopting C126 and get...
No. No. So 2205, together with the rezonings that we are proposing, so some general residential, mixed use and public use zone and a bit of flood overlay, together with the words that are here, and I know it's long, but 2205 is part of this planning scheme amendment. So if you're referring, if council's of a mind to refer it to an independent panel, we would refer the whole package, all the submissions, our assessment of the submissions. The panel would read all of that information. They would come down and they would hold a hearing. People would submit, they would ask questions, and then they go away and make a recommendation. The way it works, the minister appoints independent people with appropriate qualifications for the issues that are being raised. So it's not, they're experts in their field, and the field that deals with the issues that we're actually dealing with here. So it's designed specifically to provide guidance, because sometimes, as I say, there isn't agreement. In fact, regularly there isn't agreement. So the system supports helping councils and the minister come to the right conclusion about what the nature of this change is, because you don't do it lightly.
Councillor O'Connell, you had a question?
In your introduction, you said about an alternative recommendation of abandoning the planning scheme. You said wholly or in part. So in part, what could that mean, abandoning that section?
Yes, look, it may be that council wants to explore other changes, or changes other than the ones that we've recommended tonight to the planning scheme amendment. I think that if you were going to do that, and we'd be happy to work with council to do that, then you should defer consideration tonight while that can take place, because I can't unpack this and put a recommendation to you about an alternative on the spot tonight. That requires further conversation, yeah.
Further questions?
Sorry, one thing I do need to say that is if you are of a mind to modify it further, on the basis of the submissions that we have right now, in support and against, you will most likely end up at a panel anyway. Because we're not going to get, we're probably unlikely to get everyone to agree because not everyone agrees now. So, you know, some people are happy with this. Will they be happy with a change? So I just caution you that you're going to end up at a panel. If you defer it, you're going to end up at a panel probably anyway.
So, Tom,
Councillor Reeves?
yeah, thanks, Kate. Look, I think you've been really helpful in explaining things, and I think everybody's on the edge of their seat listening to this. And I've sort of, having read this and understood that we're probably going to end up with a panel anyway, and there's a few nods in the background, and this might be a way to progress the matter without actually adopting the scheme at this stage, so we get a much better outcome before we progress forward.
Yes, so the recommendation at the moment is to go to a panel. You'll notice that adopt that the amended proposal that we're putting to you. So we've amended the documentation. So this would be going to the panel without the special use zone, but with the policy. And the officers have to go with a position on behalf of council. So we have to go and represent an argument, and we've set that out in here. But it would become very clear to the panel that there is opposition to that and that council is cautious about what the right answer is. So we would make that clear in our submissions to the panel as part of that process.
Councillor Ellis, did you have a follow-up question? And then Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I think Councillor Reeves and I, we're going to the same place. I'm just trying to assess the situation I have on the desk in front of me. And what I have is, one is to reject the application before council and vote against it. Two is to actually support the motion. And then there's this third option. And and to defer any decision making, but still see if we can take it to a panel. And that's the question I'm leading to now, because I'm twixt in between with this, because we're the decision makers. The panel considerations will come back to council if I don't misinterpret this, and we could still end up having to be in the same place again in some months' time, and I'll be wrestling with the same question: do I support the recommendation, or do I reject it fully? So those words simply lead to the question: can we defer the matter to the panel without adopting C126?
No, you have to make a decision about what it is that you're referring to the panel, right? If you don't adopt this modified planning scheme amendment C126 documentation, Appendix 1, then we're reverting back to what the original proposal was that was exhibited. Okay, so we're asking you to adopt that because there has to be something that the panel is considering. You can't go there vaguely and say, can you help us work this out?
Councillor Roberts, you had a question?
If council was to support the recommendation that's before us, it says that it would adopt the planning scheme amendment C126 documentation in Appendix 1, but then after it was adopted, then refer it to the planning panel. What would the benefit of referring it to a planning panel be if it's already been adopted?
We're asking council to take a position to put to the panel. Okay? So the panel considers the position and says, is this a good position or isn't it? You know, having a regard for everything. What would I recommend? What would the panel recommend to council? It's not like VCAT. They're not telling you what decision to make. They're making a recommendation. That report comes back to council. Then you decide whether you're going to endorse it and send it to the minister for approval. Because in the end, it's not us that approves it, it's the Minister for Planning. So there are 2 more steps in this process. Well, 3, probably.
Got a follow-up question? And then council.
And I thank you for that answer. I hope it's cleared a lot in where we're heading with this. But my final question, and then I'll back off, is what impact, if we were to support sending it to a panel, would that have on members of the community? There's a lot of people here tonight, and they've given up their time. They've got to run businesses and be at home with their families on a cold 9-degree night. What impact will that have on them in terms of us deferring a decision right now? And is there any costs involved to them or any other inconveniences? I think the community deserves to know what happens if we make a particular decision.
Well, I think if you're going to defer it, it just drags the process out, to be honest. So that drags the process out for everybody, unless you think that by further discussion before you refer it to a panel, you're going to somehow get a solution here.
Kate, I'm saying, what say if we decide to send it to a panel? What are any potential costs, inconveniences, commitments, etc., that members of the community affected by our decision-making process can incur?
Well, the panel will be held locally, so it will be held during the day, hopefully not 9 degrees, so hopefully it'll be a warmer day. And it will, it probably doesn't require them to do any more work than they've already done in terms of the presenting their case, but that's up to individuals about whether they want to take specific planning or legal advice about representing their position. Depends what level of importance they want to put on it. It's not a formal hearing, but there are rules around it. It's a public hearing. People can sit in it for as long as they like, or they can just come and do their bit. But it's generally managed as a very inclusive process. It's an inquiry, if you like, in terms of understanding the circumstances, so that people can so that the panel can make a genuine recommendation to council, having taken everything into account, and that's the role that they have. So it's local, it's informal, or as formal as you would like it to be.
I've got a question from Councillor Reeves. I think Councillor Pels, did you have a question? Yeah, Councillor Reeves.
So my question is that if we adopt this, and so this is a position, but it may not be the position that we think is best, the way that it can be modified is to get these people to go to the panel and convey in no uncertain terms to the panel that they want that changed. And the panel can then come back and say, you got it wrong, council, this is actually what you need to do, and you need to adopt that. This is the process for that voice to get into that change. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Look, if there's concern about the use of the word adopt in the recommendation, that first word, we could say endorse. It just needs to be clear that council is sending this proposal to the panel. Yes.
Any further questions? Councillor Toohey.
Mr Mayor, I would like to foreshadow an alternative motion. Would you like me to read that out now?
You can.
My alternative motion would be that Council, as the planning authority for East Gippsland Planning Scheme, and having considered all relevant matters, resolves to, point 1, abandon Planning Scheme Amendment C126 relating to the implementation of the Paintsville Marine Precinct Master Plan in accordance with Section 23(1)(c) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, and 2, write to the Minister for Planning in accordance with Section 28 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, advising of Council's decision to abandon Planning Scheme Amendment C126.
Councillor Buckley, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to second that.
So you've moved that?
Yes. Oh, well, no, I've foreshadowed.
Well, there's no motion on the table at the moment. So I can move.
It's on the table.
You can move that motion.
So you've moved, Councillor Buckley seconded it? Would you like to speak to the motion?
I would like to very much, thank you. In regards to the marine precinct down there, having worked down there for nearly the last 20 years and having seen the way things have progressed, if you can refer to it as that, I have to concur with the earlier speakers who are against this proposal. It's far too limiting, and it's not, in my opinion, what this particular area needs. There's a lot of other things that this particular area does need, but limiting the ability for people to run a business down there to just marine-style businesses is far too limiting when, of course, there's no alternative industrial land in Paintsville, and there won't be for between 2 and 5 years, depending on how things work out. So, in my opinion, it's not suitable for this area. People have made decisions based on council's position that is other than this, and they have spent a lot of money with the knowledge that they were given at the time. To change this position now is just not fair. In my opinion, it's not fair. This is an unwarranted and unneeded imposition on everybody who is in that area, and all people of Paintsville, I must say. You know, they potentially will be forced to go to different areas to get services that are other than marine. So I wish to pursue the motion as I've stated. Thank you.
Thanks, Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion as a seconder?
No, I think that's quite adequately covered. Thank you, Councillor Toohey.
Speakers against the motion?
Look, I will reluctantly, and I do hear the concerns of the community, but in abandoning this, I think that we're going to end up at a panel anyway. We're going to have to start again, and we'll end up back at the same point, and it might just delay an inevitable decision. That's my concern. I think there was a way forward and a position to take, and a way for the community to express their views and modify the planning scheme, and now we don't have that, and that's my concern, and I worry about that.
Speaker for the motion, Councillor White.
I would just like to say that if we go with this motion and it gets up, that possibly one of the things that's been holding Slip Road back has been probably this uncertainty for so many years. And if we just make a firm decision on the fact that it can remain as an industrial area, light industrial area, we may actually see some development there, and with a bit of help from council, perhaps some beautification on the foreshore area, just to make it look a more appealing area. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Is there any further speakers? Councillor Ellis.
I wish to speak against the motion. I, in summary, support Councillor Reid's work. We are faced with a panel whether we reject it this evening or adopt the initial recommendation. Paintsville is in a period of transition in terms of growth, and as such is recognising the needs for industrial lands to be made available. I haven't heard anything that's contrary to private enterprise in this discussion this evening. I've heard Director Nelson outline a series of options and considerations for us. This is an emotive matter and needs some sort of independence, and I think a panel will offer that. Making it now is like cutting your nose off to spite your face, in the sense that we reject this. A lot of good work and a lot of the policy will in this document, which provides for the benefit of the wider business community of Paintsville, will be gone, and at some time into the future, we will have to develop a like plan, whether it's called marine plan or called the light industrial plan or the concrete plan, whatever it might be called. Under the state planning laws, we will have to redevelop it. We'll be reinventing the wheel. So in those cases, I encourage councillors to reject the motion of Councillor Tui's, even though I do respect the point and concede the need at times for immediate decision making. I think adopting Ms Nelson's position is probably the most sensible part here, because we are faced, as I say, with it or not. It's like a VCAT matter. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Further speakers? Speaking against, Councillor Pearls?
I'd just like to say the office staff have delivered a open negotiation with the community in all aspects. I think the work that they've done with this project has been quite outstanding. With regards to my fellow councillors Reeves and Ellis, I agree that this will go to a mediation to a panel of some type anyway, and I believe that we did have a position to move forward with the whole concept, and there were some great things in that concept plan. There were some really important issues with regards to the port and the amalgamation or the development of the police precinct, and also the foreshore at the unattractive end of that island there. I think basically as you drive in, and I think there'll be things that will be lost should you support Councillor Tui's position. With regards to the whole scenario, well, I think we're actually struggling to come to a happy medium here, and probably the best import of it all is to have to send it to a panel hearing, and I believe that's probably the best support I can give it. I won't be supporting Councillor Tui or Buckley's recommendation.
Any further speakers for? Any further speakers against? Councillor Tui has a right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very averse to making a decision based on something that may occur. Regardless of how this turns out, this will be a question that we have to answer ultimately anyway. Even if it goes to a panel, it will come back to us for a decision. We will have to make that decision as to what we're doing down there. Now, from my point of view, I see that we have spent a considerable amount of staff time on this proposal. That I personally would have far rather seen that time spent out at Lindeno, creating that plan out there, when it's patently obvious from the community, as per what we have here tonight, that this is not what our community wants. Now, we are here to serve our community and to look after our community and to take into account what our community is telling us. And I don't believe that that going to a panel is what our community wants, and I don't believe it's a decision that they want us to make. And I understand that there are planning issues. I also believe that we can address some of those issues down there separately, but I cannot support the motion that has been put to us, and I would ask people to support my alternative motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Tui. There being no further debate, I will now put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 5. Against? Motion's carried 5-4. The market will turn.
That's exactly right.
Item 5.2.4 is amended planning permit application 413-2016 PB. Application to amend the wording of condition number 9 of planning permit 413-2016 P at 27 Golf Links Road, Lakes Entrance.
Mr Mayor, we have a speaker on this, Mr Veneto Gazzarri.
Mr. Benito Gazzarri, would you like to come forward, please?
This was, that was a bad decision.
Welcome, Mr. Gazzarri. Just need to turn that microphone on. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and for the opportunity to really explain the reasons and the circumstances behind our amendment application. It's absolutely critically important. First, I'd like to identify myself. I'm Benito Gazzarri. I live in Tyrolean. I've lived in Gippsland all my life and for many years conducted a large petroleum distribution business in the region. The Golf Links Road property was acquired 12 years ago and is held as a family and superannuation fund investment by Bass Strait Views Proprietary Limited on behalf of the Gazzarri and Howlings families. My company has always sought to deliver a project that met all the needs of the Shire, would benefit the local community and especially those who will be the long-term users of the project when it's completed. I know we have sought the best available advice, used the services of the best available specialist consultants to come up with a project that delivers and achieves best practice. During the process, myself and our consultants have met with or exchanged correspondence with Shire planning staff, namely Director Holton and Director Waite, Aaron Hollows, Manager Statutory Services, and Martin Ireland, who I don't think is here this evening. This was done collectively or independently on at least 60 occasions over 15 months. We've been at this project. That's important. I felt confident we had reached a position where we had effectively ticked all the boxes and we were ready for works to proceed until the planning permit conditions were provided in somewhat alternative form to what had been foreshadowed and agreed. We were totally unaware of the conditions contained in point 9, dot points 1 and 3, until we received our copy of the official planning permit. It was then we discovered my company was required to fully design and reconstruct the whole of Golf Links Road, and the infrastructure to the Shire specifications and pay 100% of the cost. When we learnt about the conditions, we immediately protested and brought to the planning staff attention that we were unaware of point 9 conditions and pointed out that we had already contributed significantly in the past under a previous planning permit which required my company to reconstruct approximately 200 metres of Golf Links Road from the Princes Highway to the residential development on the north side of Golf Links Road. So we've already expended a huge amount of money on that road. We also pointed out we had agreed to pay for the Vic Roads Golf Links Road intersection with the Princes Highway, the safety upgrade, construct the north side footpath, and it was our company that offered to construct the turning pad at the entrance exit of the service station to minimise the Shire's long-term maintenance costs. At no stage during any of the meetings or exchanges over 15 months was the reconstruction of Golf Links Road to the extent reflected in point 9 ever raised or mentioned by the Director of Planning, Senior Management or staff? At no stage. I am sure councillors will understand this surprise has caused a significant amount of stress and unbudgeted further investment in addition to the holding costs already incurred on the property over many years. We also explained we are a small locally owned family company, which is predominantly financed by the Director's superannuation funds and was not in the business of building Shire roads and infrastructure under duress or threat. The Shire officials then suggested a compromise and offered to pay 50% towards the cost of building the road and infrastructure. When asked what the costs of reconstruction would be, the planning staff could not tell us. However, they made a commitment to come back and advise. 6 months have since passed, and my company has not received any further information in respect to the costs, which has virtually forced us to bring the issue forward and get it over and done with by applying for this amendment. We've been pushed into it. We suggested to the planning staff that the East Gippsland Shire design construction of the road and the infrastructure to their specifications, and when the costs are known, my company would consider contributing financially to the costs. It was explained to the planning staff that it was totally unreasonable to expect a company to make a financial commitment where costs are unknown and provide an open chequebook. The latter is effectively what the planning staff are asking my company to do. We were shocked to learn the planning staff put our planning permit application to council, indicating that my company had agreed to reconstruct Golf Links Road to the levels reflected in point 9 at my company's cost. This is incorrect, and my company did not agree to such a condition. And in the normal course of reasonable business, surely if we'd agreed to spend such a huge amount of money, anywhere between $200, $300, I've got no idea, $1,000, one would expect that there'd be some formal agreement and formal exchange in writing, and there'd be a signature somewhere. Well, I can tell you, if someone can produce that document, I'll honour it. The planning department, by its actions, has denied my company the opportunity to reassess the viability of the project before the planning permit was submitted to council. In other words, if this was a requirement, we would have had the opportunity to sit down, redo our sums, have a look at the project, check out its viability, and then make a decision. And we could have made an informed decision as to whether the project could carry the extra costs, and if these added costs rendered the project unviable, we would not have proceeded by spending all the money in the preparation with drilling, architects, drawings, etc. We've spent up to pretty close to $100,000. We wouldn't have spent that money if we had have known what the rules would be right from the beginning. The planning department has not been transparent or informative about their actions to include the 2 contentious conditions in point 9. My company, being unaware of point 9, proceeded with the project in good faith and has expended many thousands of dollars on planning permits, amendment planning fees, town planning consultants, and it goes on infinitum. My company has then tried to find a solution to the stalemate and asked the East Gippsland Shire planning staff to arrange a second meeting with senior officials, which they facilitated, and we were grateful for that. In attendance was the Mayor, Director of Planning, and the Director of Operations, the company's town planner and myself. At this meeting, it was pointed out by my company, we only became aware of the conditions contained in point 9 when we received our copy of the official council minutes and approved planning permit. The Director of Planning displayed annoyance and made the following statement, that he had mandated to the planning staff there were to be no surprises in approved planning permits for applicants. He made that statement. Then it follows on. The Director then turned and looked at both the Mayor and the fellow Director and suggested that they need to go away, discuss the matter and etc. Since the meeting, my company has not been advised or received any correspondence relating to the outcome of the Mayor and the 2 Directors' private meetings or whether that took place. Got no idea. Clearly, planning staff have failed East Gippsland Shire's own mission statement, quote, our vision, our mission, our values. For the record, in the Our Values statement, it reads, accountability, inclusion, integrity, respect, resourcefulness. There's 2 key words that are missing out of the mission statement. It is noted with interest, transparency and honesty are not included in the Our Values statement.
Ben, I'm not sure what you're alluding to there.
No, let me finish, please, if I may.
You can finish, but I'll ask you not to be disrespectful.
I'm
we've
not being
given you respect to address us, and if you're going to be disrespectful, I will stop you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's not personal. It's a fact. And all I'm doing is reporting, and because I take impeccable notes, is reporting exactly what's occurred. And what I read in the mission statements of the East Gippsland Shire. That's all I've quoted. I've not made any allegations.
You did make some comments about integrity and stuff, right. So...
Okay. My company has not been invited to give the opportunity. Well, we've not been invited. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead. I wish to be very firm and clear. My company did not agree to point 9 points 1 and 3 before the application was presented to councillors for approval. My company totally rejects any suggestion or claim it had agreed to these 2 contentious conditions. My company has not been invited or given the opportunity to participate in an independent mediation session to try and resolve the matter. However, we are quite prepared to do so. We'd welcome it. It is disappointing at no stage during the planning application procedure that any recognition has been given to the company in respect to the economic value and benefits the project offers for the Lakes Entrance community. I'm sure that councillors understand we can and we would want to contest the council's decision at VCAT. I think you appreciate that this will cause a further process of delay plus additional costs to both council and our company as the proponent. I'm hoping, therefore, that common sense might prevail here and the councillors will accept that. The further costs, extra demand placed on my company for the road and the infrastructure construction charge is untenable and inequitable. Moreover, that such a charge was never raised in all our contact with the Shire and its planning department. I do sincerely thank you for the opportunity to say my piece. It's been a long drawn-out process. We want to get on with the project. If any councillors have gone past the site of recent date, you'll see we're expending a lot of money. We've got equipment there and we've let the contracts for the residential subdivision at the top where we intend to build 6 very high-class homes. So we're showing our confidence and faith and we'd like council to consider what I've said and our amendment application, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Gazzarri. Any questions while Mr Gazzarri's here, Councillor? Councillor Roberts.
Is it true that Mr Gazzarri was not provided on the initial planning documents, the planning application that he was to, is it true that it was not included on the original planning document for the condition of the roads, etc., to be included?
Councillor, we had some preliminary meetings with Mr Gazzarri before the application was lodged. He wished to know what type of conditions, if it was ever to be approved, would be likely to be on the permit. I can't recollect, and I'm going to take Mr Gazzarri's word for it, but I'd be very surprised if we didn't say infrastructure upgrades, but I'll take Mr Gazzarri's word on it. Councillors, you will recall that this application was subject of a planning consultation meeting where issues such as pedestrian safety, road traffic management was heavily raised by numerous objectors. I also take exception to the requirement for council officers, as a proposal is mooted, having to be able to tell an applicant every single condition that will come on a planning permit. That's not our role. It's something that occurs through the process, and it depends what the process reveals. The process of a planning application is to have referrals and obtain expert advice. In this case, the advice on the roads, drainage, etc. comes from our internal engineers. There are also other issues that must be considered, and that is matters raised in objections. We know that in the objections, there was lots of concern raised by local landowners about the safety of children going to St Brendan's Church. There was a lot of discussion about children having to use the road, and there was a lot of discussion about the fact that this development was going to be a node. It was going to be an attractor of traffic and volumes on what is currently a residential standard street. With a residential standard street only expected to get minor traffic flows, its deterioration wouldn't be for some time. We've allowed for a proposal. We would expect that any developer, as part of their due diligence, would realise that a road like that may need to be reviewed and be considered for reconstruction. And I would have thought Mr Gazzarri would have got some own advice on that. And indeed, council officers, realising that the road would deteriorate quickly, came to the party with Mr Gazzarri in some meetings and said, we will pay for 50% of that road reconstruction and the footpath construction. To say that we weren't transparent, we went through a planning consultation meeting. We went through full advertising with the community. We then produced minutes of a planning consultation meeting. We then produced a council report which was available for review on the Friday before the council meeting. We had an open council meeting to determine the application with all the conditions listed in that particular report. I think council's been very transparent and we've followed all procedures and policy. I know that's a long answer. I know you've had a long night. Sorry if I went too long.
Councillor Ellis, you had a question.
I do. It's for the Director of Governance. Ms Bennett, I've got a question for you.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's a long day. It's council's process to make public an agenda, council's agenda for public information. Can you just outline for Mr Gazzarri when we would make that forthcoming agenda available for public access, and where could the public access our agenda, please, as a start?
Council's agenda is published on the web at 4 p.m. on Friday and is available from Council's general website.
Thank you. As a matter of course, in a report from an officer, and it's say in such as tonight's agenda, would the recommendations of the officers be published in that particular document and web page?
If I could just correct, the officer who's responsible for all business papers has just corrected me. It's 1 p.m, not 4 p.m. The answer to that question is yes. The officer's recommendation is always published in the agenda.
Perhaps this is pulling a long bow, Mr. Hollow, but can you recall whether or not recommendation 9 was published in that agenda on that particular date?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Councillor Tui, you had a question?
I did have a question. I'm not sure who to address it to. Mr. Gazzarri referred to a 6-month delay in asking for some sort of costing on the road, and correct me if I'm wrong, up until this point you've not had a reply to that request. Can I ask if that's the case, and if so, why?
If I recall correctly, we discussed sharing the design cost of the road. I mean, the reality is most developers would do their own due diligence and get an estimate of costs. It doesn't require final design. It's engineering consultancy will provide an indicative rate for that sort of road upgrade. Council agreed to share the cost of that design. Mr. Gazzarri showed no interest at any time in contributing to the design cost, nor has he ever committed to any substantial contribution to road upgrade.
And so you had a follow-up question, Councillor Tui?
Chris, so would it not be fair for us to give even a budget estimate or some form of advice as to what that cost might be?
Be fairly unusual for a council to provide engineering advice and provide costings for a project that is a development project. It's not something we would normally enter into.
So if that were the case, why was that position not conveyed to Mr. Gazzarri?
The position was always clear that we would share costs for the design work, as we said we would share costs for the construction of the road.
Sorry, my point being that Mr. Gazzarri's of the opinion that we never got back to him at all in regards to this. So if we're not in the business of doing that, which I accept, that to be the case, that perhaps that should have been conveyed to Mr. Gazzarri, not nothing.
If I may clarify as well, Mr. Gazzarri lodged a planning permit application to remove the entire requirement to build the road and build the footpath. A matter of a couple of months after that meeting that he had with us, and therefore we had, we basically weren't in a position to price the road or give him those costs because he was seeking to remove the condition entirely.
Councillor Roberts had a question as well.
It said the initial planning, one of the initial conditions was that the proponent was to cover the full cost of the road and the footpath. At what point did council, the officer's opinion change to half the cost or co-contribute?
Councillor, there was the permit issued and Mr. Gazzarri contacted council and wished to have some discussions, and it was at that point in time after the permit had issued that we had worked through the matters that Mr. Gazzarri didn't agree with, and there was at that time that the directors thought that a cost-sharing arrangement would be sensible, given the fact that it is also going to be a council road with local traffic, of course.
Councillor Ellis?
I've got three quick questions. One is just a clarification of the road that we're talking about. And I take it that from my recollection of this particular application, that it was only between the Princes Highway and Sea Lake Close. Am I correct in that thing? A matter of a couple of 100 metres? Right, thank you. The second point is, which did concern me, I can recall the ninth condition, and thinking about the condition of that road, being quite familiar with that area, and thinking that was a reasonable application, and reading about it, of course, in the briefing session, and it was an obvious matter. But I took it as the decision of council that Mr. Gazzarri, as the applicant, would meet his obligation and make this road as part of his conditions. Where does council officer get the right to make a decision to enter into a bartering situation with Mr. Gazzarri when it's a council decision that he should have paid for the whole kit and caboodle? I'm interested to understand that. Where does that come from? There must be some reason.
I don't think it's uncommon at all to negotiate conditions that occur on an original permit. There are often requests for amendments to permits. At the end of the day, that was a decision based on what we decided was, or what we thought at officer level was fairness between council and the developer.
Council, I just had a couple of questions, I think. Yeah. Ben, did you want to say?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are statements being made, and there's an answer to each of those statements, if I could, please. The best available time is 4 p.m. on the Friday night. The council meeting's on the following Tuesday. To my understanding and information and advice that I sought, that once it's on the agenda, well, first of all, we didn't pick it up because that particular weekend I was away, but I don't know, I'm unaware that there's a facility to be able to object if it's already on the agenda. So I'm confused about that one. The next one is when we're going to provide 50% of the cost. 50% of what? We've got absolutely no idea. Are we committing ourselves to spend $200,000 or $2? You know, we don't know. I'm sorry, but in the commercial world, we don't do business like that. And in respect to we've already constructed at great cost under a separate planning permit the road from the highway at least 200 metres, which only takes it halfway down Golf Links Road. Golf Links Road is about 450 metres long. But we've already constructed half with curbing. The only thing missing is on the north side of the road, which wasn't a part of our earlier permit condition. We haven't constructed the footpath. Now, we've offered to do whatever Vic Roads wants for safety on the intersection of Princes Highway and Golf Links Road. We've offered to complete all the curbing and infrastructure. It was us who said we will put this huge turning pad in so the Shire doesn't incur ongoing maintenance with traffic coming in and out of one spot. And an important point is during the planning stage, it was advised to us and suggested to us that we put left-hand turns in, no right-hand turn lanes, no right-hand turn signs to direct the traffic back onto the Princes Highway. That was told to us, and and the other right. And when you read condition 9 in closely, it's just so open. I'm sorry, I can't go in and do business with just this openness. It should be more defined, and maybe the planning department will pick that up for any future business that they're doing with people where you should get people committed if they're going to do something.
Mr. Mayor, it sort of sounds like we're in debate at the moment, and I thought
Yeah,
Mr.
no, we're
Gazzardi
certainly
was
not.
giving a presentation, and I think we've heard the matter.
No, they certainly weren't in debate. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I'm happy.
Ta.
Thanks. Good evening.
Okay, Aaron.
So councillors, there's a recommendation in front of you to, for refusal of the application to amend the permit. I just want to reiterate that the permit as it was issued stands. This is just this proposed amendment to condition 9 of the permit. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Councillor Pels.
Mr. Hullo, I'm just curious about the length of the expected section of Golf Links Road that the applicant is proposed to actually upgrade. Wondering whether he was stating that work has already been done, because to me it only appears to be like 100 metres, maybe it's 200 metres, I'm not really sure. And I have a follow-on question after this.
As Mr. Gazzardi said, he thinks it's about 450 metres. There's always a requirement to obviously construct out the front of his property. That's something that you're always required to do. I can actually recall, as can Director Holton, I believe, that we raised the issue about vehicles that might be screwing out of that and into the road, and that we suggested they look at some concrete padding there on the road and construction of that part of the road. So I'm in agreement with you, Councillor. I don't believe it's as extensive as 450 metres when you take out his development site as well.
Question is, why was he asked or requested to build it all the way through to Sea Link? Is it Sea Link Road? Sea Link Close.
Yeah. So, councillors, the reason why that decision was made was that it was clear to planning officers and the engineers that the whole of Golf Links Road, from Palmer's Road through to this site, would be utilised by, in particular, localised traffic. This is a proposal for a service petrol station and 2 convenience restaurants. We know that a lot of the traffic will be coming from the western side of Lakes Entrance, and a conservative view that I had a look at this afternoon, 60% of the town would live on the western side of this site, and they would use clearly Golf Links Road rather than going the long route around the highway.
Councillor Ellis, you had a follow-up question?
Just clarification from what Mr. Gazzardi said. Did I take it that he was responsible for the construction of Golf Links Road from Palmer's Road to Sea Lake Close in another previous application?
Mr. Gazzardi's saying no.
No, only the requirement was only up to the residential development that's on the north side, and from the highway to just past there is 200 metres.
Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, does it mean it says, you said his permit still stands? Can he go ahead and do what he wants to do without this work? You said his permit still stands. Can he go as far as he intends to without us, without having to deal with these issues?
Councillor, no. I want to try and be as clear as I can. The planning permit that was issued by council stands. If you made a decision tonight to refuse the application to amend the permit, council's making a decision not to amend condition 9. So Mr. Gazzardi would be bound by condition 9 as per the permit that was issued by council.
That would stop his project.
Councillor Pels.
Thank you. As a follow-up to Councillor Buckley's question then, where has the option of council funding some of the road or part of the road or all the rest of the road. Where has that gone in this agreement, or doesn't it stand anymore?
Councillors, so just to support and agree with Director Holton that there was negotiations that were entered into good faith by both parties. Those negotiations completely broke down. An application to amend the permit to delete the conditions was put forward, so obviously all negotiations had ceased. If we were of a mind to continue to negotiate with 50% contribution, then we would also be of a mind to continue with requesting Mr Gazzarri to provide us with 50% of the design and the investigative dollars required.
Some further questions? Councillor Reeves?
I'm happy to move the motion, Mr Mayor.
It's been moved by Councillor Reeves. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Ellis. Speakers?
Yeah, look, just quickly, I think that this has been spoken at length ad nauseum here, but just a quick search has revealed the Australian Government has a road construction cost and infrastructure procurement benchmark document that Mr Gazzarri might be able to reference and get an understanding of potential costs. That'd be good business practice.
So, any further speakers? Councillor Ellis.
Just simply to say that I thank the officers for their frankness and openness in responding to the questions of Mr Gazzarri and of councillors in relation to this matter. The situation is that Mr Gazzarri has lost nothing with this application, and I would welcome him as a citizen of Lakes Entrance and as a councillor for the Greater East Gippsland Shire for him to renegotiate his position with council officers for the benefit of our community and for the benefit of his company. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried 6-3. Buckley, White and Pels. Item 5.3.1 is Regional and District Events Sponsorship Raids, Round 2, 2017-18 Assessment. This is Mr Morton.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, as you're aware, Council runs a raids grant program twice a year. The current round we received 15 applications totalling a value of $110,850, which was quite high. The purpose of raids is to facilitate support and enhancement of events throughout the Shire, and the program obviously stimulates economic activity within the towns that the events operate in. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen a significant increase in visitors from Victoria, interstate and international as well, attending a lot of the events that we have supported through the raids program. The panel recommendations contained within the report indicate that there's a number of applications over the next 5 financial years. The reason being is that a lot of those events, the applications are actually for 2 or 3 years. So that's where that comes from. The recommendation is contained within the report, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mr Morton. Any questions, councillors? Councillor White.
With the amounts that you've allocated here, I did have a phone call from one of the applicants recently to see, if they were on the list. Are these figures what they'd asked for, or are they a proportion of, like how you've broken it down? Like, did most of the people that have applied, if they asked for 5,000, would they have gotten 5,000 or something like that?
Yeah, thanks for your question. The majority of the ones that are allocated there, yes, that would be the case. Yeah.
Sorry. Just refer you to the attachment or appendix, which details the requested funding and the amount that is recommended. And so some of them, yes, were provided with the exact amount that they applied for, and others was reduced. I don't think any got more than they asked for.
Is there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Pells.
Yeah, I was just curious about the cross-marathon expenditure and how often we seem to be funding them for $10,000.
Yeah, so Councillor Pell's, part of the roads funding is obviously to attract and support events. The event that AJ Events has been bringing to East Gippsland for the last number of years has grown significantly, and there is an associated cost, I suppose, in attracting those events, and that's where this comes down to. So there are other events that have a community benefit that are under the community grant scheme, which is in another report, but this one is around event attraction and supporting events within the region.
Can you just clarify the amount in full that we're actually giving to them? Is it the 15,000 or is it 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 30,000?
It's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000.
So it's 30,000 over 3 years.
Correct.
Yeah, Councillor Ellis.
I do apologise for asking some questions on this issue. I didn't intend to, but I'm looking at that company, AJ Events. Once we provide the grants, and this is probably something I do know, but I'm going to ask this question, are these companies required to provide an acquittal of the monies provided to them back to council, so we know that their monies have been spent and that debts incurred by that company in running the events, which reflect on us as partners, that they're all met?
Yeah, they certainly do. So each organisation that applies for funding is successful enters into an agreement with council, and they certainly have to provide an acquittal at the finalisation of the event. Yep.
Any other questions?
Just add that future funding is also determined on the basis of whether they have met their commitments to provide those acquittals. So we would not be recommending funding for organisations that have failed to meet that obligation.
Thanks, Mr. Holton. No further questions. There's a recommendation before us, councillors. Moved Councillor Ellis, seconded Councillor White. Any further speakers? I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 5.4.1, Audit and Risk Committee Charter Review, and we did have circulated that amendment. Thank you, Director Bennett. Are you going to introduce this one? Kaya, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report before you seeks council review and adoption of the draft revised Audit and Risk Committee Charter is listed with or without amendment. The committee's current terms of reference has reached the end of its 2-year review period. Coupled with this, council officers undertook the process of including the amendments to the Local Government Bill 2018 that affects the Audit Committee's powers and responsibilities in advance of the required timelines. Apart from any administrative changes that were identified, the specific changes that have been included within the new charter are a change to the name of the committee, which will now be referred to as the Audit and Risk Committee, and the terms of reference now being referred to as the Audit Committee Charter. There's also an increase in the monitoring against the requirements of the Local Government Bill, minimum requirements relating to the composition and skills base of the Audit Committee and its members, the requirement of the committee to review the risk registers of council to help guide the annual audit work program, the mandatory requirement for those on the committee to also participate in the annual performance review process. The Audit Committee was actually presented with this particular draft at their April meeting where they noted the changes that were made and were comfortable with what was proposed. So if there are, I'm happy to field any questions on that. Otherwise, I'd like to propose that the Council endorse the recommendation as provided within the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Kai. Any questions, councillors? Moved Councillor Pells, seconded Councillor Reeves. Any speakers? Questions? All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 5.4.2, proposed lease of land to Coppercam Limited, 2 Gibbo Street, Benambra.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to request that we defer this item. We defer the item on grounds that we've received letters from the public after the Section 223 hearing held on 24th of the 4th, questioning whether proper due process was followed. One of the submitters has alleged that they were not given the proper right to be heard as per the Local Government Act. There have been allegations of misconduct, and to ensure that we have followed the correct Section 223 process, I request that we defer the matter until it's been followed up accordingly.
Is there a seconder to defer it? Councillor White.
Is this a motion before council?
To defer the item. Councillor Roberts has moved to defer the item. And it's seconded by Councillor White. Did you want to speak to deferment, Councillor White?
Yeah, I also received several submissions from members of the public just regarding the process, and that was they wish to have another go. Like they felt that they weren't dealt with fairly. Yes, so well, that's.
So we've got a motion before us to defer this item.
Could I have a question, please?
You can have a question, yes.
Yeah. In item 2, it says A, right to the 2 submitters. What does that mean? What did people, are they people that have objected or
through the
submitted
223
a tender?
Through the 223. The 223, when Lynette came and spoke, remember?
Well, that's the 2 submitters we're talking about.
Yeah.
I want to
Okay,
put
that's
a
all I want.
clarification.
Councillor Powell's question.
Yep.
John, can you turn your... Oh, sorry.
Just a query as to whether, my question is, does Councillor Roberts have a conflict of interest putting this to the table, given the fact the 2 submitters were related to him?
It's something he's got to determine himself.
I'm happy to take advice, but I'm not going to declare a conflict of interest.
That's his decision.
Yeah. Is there any further questions?
I'm just concerned that I'm not able to make any sort of decision because I don't fully understand the reasoning for the deference again, and I'd like to ask Councillor Roberts to speak to the matter so we can understand the actual reasons why we should defer what seems to me on the outset a straightforward lease decision.
It wasn't to the lease. Am I right? Am I okay to speak? I don't want to enter into debate. That's all.
No, you can clarify.
Clarification.
That's why you want
The question was raised not specifically to the lease, but to the Section 223 hearing process. The submitter who was speaking to the proposal felt that they had not been given the proper position to speak before this council, as per the Act.
As the chairman of that 223 hearing, there was some heated discussion, and I have responded to the person in relation to the issue as they raised, and in that letter I confirmed that I don't believe that a further 223 hearing is required.
This motion is not requesting that there's an additional 223. I'm just requesting that we defer this item. Sorry, correction.
Councillor Ellis.
Okay, well, clearly this is getting to a stage where it's of some concern. Now, if this is the letter that was distributed to councillors,
yes,
it includes a complaint against Councillor Reeves. And so the obvious question that I have to ask in making this decision is, and I'm seeking governance advice here, is should we be discussing this matter because of the circumstances of the contents of the letters? Am I too vague with that?
My understanding, complaints against councillors are a matter for the mayor, assisted with the CEO. My understanding, and I'm looking to the mayor here, is that the mayor has responded on that issue as well.
I have, yes. There was a letter emailed and a hard copy mailed.
So just to clarify that, both aspects of the letter, which was that a fair Section 223 submission wasn't held, and two, that Councillor Reeves was alleged to have engaged in inappropriate conduct, have been addressed and responded to by the mayor.
Yeah, look, I think that's an obvious question. Come on, I'm trying not to dig. I'm just trying to...
So what are we gaining from deferring this?
Yeah.
What will we gain?
In the event that hindsight is always 20/20, and if we look back and we find that maybe we were not performing the 223 and requirements of the Act, if it was found that we weren't following the proper process, then I believe there would be a greater consequence to council down the line.
So, Mr Mayor, can I also suggest that the submitters weren't submitting in the spirit and the letter of a 223 either. So I don't believe we should defer this matter.
So I'll put the motion to defer. Ben, did you have a question before I put it?
Yes, thank you. Would deferring this affect our arrangements with the mine in any way in delaying their program? You know, could I ask that of
But what's the purpose
Mr.
of defer?
Well,
What's the purpose?
The question is, would deferring this decision affect the mine in any way in slowing down their program? And that question perhaps is to Nelson.
I don't believe so. They're still seeking their approvals for the mine, so they don't have any, hurry to occupy the site.
Well, if there is something awkward here, if that's the case, if it's not going to affect the mine in slowing it down in any way, I think we should look at it a little bit more closely. Thank you.
The 223 was held in accordance with 223 regulations. There was nothing wrong with the 223 meeting.
But taking that on from the chair, that's good. So, Mr Mayor, have you resolved the issue and said that there was no further action in this matter? Oh, we haven't been privy to that letter, so this is one of the...
It just went out. Went out yesterday. Yeah.
Yesterday.
4th of June.
Mr Mayor, I move the motion be put.
Okay, the motion is to defer this item. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is lost. Item 5.4.2, proposed lease of land to Copperchem Limited to Gibbo Street, Benambra. We have the recommendation there.
I'm happy to move this.
Happy to second it.
Moved Councillor O'Connell, seconded Councillor Reeves. Speakers?
Look, I won't take up much more time, but I mean, this lease is a great outcome for all involved. The community gains an updated building and it's no cost to the ratepayer at all. So fully support it and recommend that you all do too.
Second, would you like to? Any further speakers against? Speakers for? No further speakers. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's 8-1, yeah, thanks. Now, before we tackle item 7, we have a couple of speakers, Mr CEO, I believe.
Yes, we have Mr Squires first, who wants to speak to the streetscape upgrade stage 2, which is in a closed confidential section. So we'd ask Mr Squires to come forward, please. They gave him another cup of coffee, so he was fine.
Mr Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. First off, I just want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for any particular group in Orbost. This is my individual submission. However, having said that, I am active in quite a lot of organisations in our community. I think I have a fair understanding of what the community is thinking on a lot of issues. The streetscape stage one was completed last year and has been, to most people in the community anyway, a roaring success. During 2016, there was extensive consultation prior to that process run by the Shire and the consultants that the Shire had employed. That consultation included the formation of a community reference group, which was made up from members of Orbost community, including Orbost Regional Health, Mudgee, Aboriginal Co-op, Police, Chamber of Commerce, Senior Citizens, Neighbourhood House and a Youth Ambassador. There was also a consultation breakfast with Nicholson Street traders, who were those going to be most impacted by the streetscape on a daily basis. There was consultation run in the main street where community members could talk to the consultants and Shire reps about their issues, and there were opportunities to comment online. All of those processes identified a number of key issues, and there was a real emphasis on the uneven and often slippery pavements, which were made worse by wet or dry leaves and the acorns from the oak trees. There was recognition of an ageing population and a significant number of trips and falls and actually broken arms and wrist as a result of some of the hazards that were in the street as it was at that stage. There was also recognition that parts of the street had cross slopes on them that were not in line with current standards. A major issue was the fact that the large oak trees in the street were causing damage to infrastructure. They were pulling up the pavers and in fact were causing structural damage to some premises. In fact, I spoke with one business owner who had had the Shire dig up the path in front of his premises 3 times to try and deal with the roots that were invading under his premises. Also, during the process, it was identified that there were need for additional crossing points in our Nicholson Street, which is quite a wide street, as most of you would know. So those initial consultation processes occurred. The consultants went away with your staff and came back for a second round of consultation where they had incorporated all of those, or not all of those, they've incorporated a number of the things that have been taken on board, that have been raised by the various people. For instance, there were, I think it's 2 locations where people will be able to cross with a small island in the middle of the road for their safety. As with all consultation, not everyone was happy with the final outcome. That's the nature of consultation, obviously. Everyone doesn't get their way. However, most people accepted the compromise situation. The contract was let in early 2017 and the work started in April. The work proceeded extremely well. The traders were impressed by the cooperation that they got from the contractor, and most in the community were very pleased with the outcome which we now have on the west side of Nicholson Street. However, whilst the work was in progress, there were some in the community who were unhappy with the trees that had been selected for the streetscape, and after some after a petition was put around town, they actually came to this table, and as a result of that, council on the 5th of September 17 moved a motion to alter the trees that would be going in Nicholson Street. and that move was to go away a little bit from evergreen trees, which and to more deciduous trees. It should be noted that some people thought that the street should have some greenery all year, and some evergreen trees in the main street in the winter were a good idea, compared with stark deciduous trees which have nothing at this time of year. It's important to note that in the preamble to the motion that was approved at your September meeting, Councillor Ellis, I think it was, noted, and I quote, "Support for this project has been evidenced by signing of what was intended to be a petition to Council by 375 Orbost residents. The nature of the document indicates that," and I emphasise this, "though the residents are happy with the streetscape works currently being undertaken by Council, they consider the choice of tree inappropriate and the Council is not acting in the best interest of their town." So those words are very important. The residents were happy with the streetscape, but it was just the trees, the selection of trees that were of concern at that stage. So it would be fair to assume that after that, the community understood that stage 2 would happen in 2018, and it would be a mirror image of stage 1, as per the plans, original plans that had been presented to the community and had been through a number of community consultation processes. Recent articles in the Snow River Mail would indicate to me that there are still some people that haven't accepted the umpire's decision, that there will be a streetscape which will be a new streetscape, which means that the old oak trees have to go. There are good reasons, as I said before, for those trees going, and they haven't changed. It seems to me that we should be way past that, and we should accept that the streetscape that we have on the west side of Nicholson Street now needs to be duplicated on the east side of Nicholson Street. I understand Council has put out for tenders on that process and may in fact be considering those after this meeting. I'm not sure whether it would be technically possible to retain those old oak trees, because when I look at them, they're all at different heights, and I know from what the consultants told us that there's got to be some benching of those footpaths to get all the right levels and so on. But even if it were technically possible to retain them, it doesn't overcome one of the major issues with this streetscape, which was to address the safety concerns, which was to address the damage caused by the roots of these very large trees, the damage caused to infrastructure, the damage caused to, in fact, premises owned by businesses in the main street. So it seems to me that if you have consultation, you go through a process of getting consensus or at least people agreeing that there's a compromise situation being developed. Then to come back at the last minute, as happened last year, and it seems to be happening again now, is not a good way to do business. Once there is an agreement on a process, we should proceed. And I urge that Council, and I'm sure I talk for a lot of people in Orbost, get on with the streetscape on the east side of Nicholson Street, and get on to the plans that were developed after the extensive community consultation, and let's duplicate what's on the west side, on the east side of Nicholson Street, and have it ready by Christmas this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
We now have Wendy Nixon who'd like to present.
Thanks, Gary.
It's already switched on. Okay.
Welcome, Wendy.
Mayor Ellis, Mayor Rotino and councillors.
It's the Mayor of Lakes Entrance.
I'd just like to say first, I've never done this before. I'm not quite as
just relax.
You're
amongst friends.
you will realise that I did endeavour to our group to present the councillors with this.
Councillor Ellis presented a copy of that to us.
Yes. Firstly, I head up what's known as the beautification team for Orbost, and we've been working in the last 10 years, and I think we've done some very successful projects. And of course, even though this was a Shire project, we still had a lot of interest, and we designed the town beautification plan around Nicholson Street, which had a feature of oak trees. And these are the oak trees that we've been talking about. On item 1 of the photos of the trees, you'll have a look. These are the trees that are causing a lot of chit-chat around the town. These oaks were planted in 1984, so they're around 30 odd years old. And from what I can gather from people that know their trees, they are basically in their prime. And they are very long-lived, and when you look at those photos, they are absolutely beautiful for 11 months of the year, and in 1 month of the year they drop their leaves. So everybody is saying, oh, you can't have leaves in the main street, you slip and you do this and you do that. I'd just like to point out to everybody and remind everybody that leaves are part of life, and they're part of every town, Europe, Canada, the Americas, South America, Orbost and Bensdale. Bensdale has a lot of beautiful trees. I don't see people complaining about those. Collins Street has beautiful trees. We don't hear people complaining about that. They say they're an asset rather than a liability. These trees, Michael Meccan, who has been through Burnley, and he has a diploma of horticulture, he says they're in perfect health. Admittedly, on the side that's just been completed, there were trees that have been hacked around by the old SEC. Some were not in very good health. There were some near the National Bank that we were told by the track consultants that they were going to be kept. And at 6 o'clock one morning, I went down the street and they had been felled, and they were perfectly healthy trees. So what we're suggesting to council is that some of these trees could be retained, and let's appreciate the atmosphere that they give to Orbost Main Street, which, according to these photos here, it's very evident. The western side of the street that's been completed on page 2, there isn't any shade at all, and there never will be, because the species that have been planted, admittedly they're under power lines, and there hasn't been room for big trees, but that photo clearly shows how bare, how uninviting it is. We can't say that one side should be a mirror image of the other, because there's different widths, there's different heights in all the shops. Some you go in on a level, some you go up 3 steps. So how can the pavements accommodate all of those shops? When Orbost, when the Shire, Orbost Shire, at that stage planted these trees, the chit-chat around the town was, oh, they'll cover up the ugly shops. And if you have a look on item 3, you'll see what I mean by ugly shops. They've become very evident, and if the trees on north of Worsley Street are removed, all you see now is a couple of businesses and the rest of the shops are empty. So if these trees on item 4 are retained, they will help cover up the empty shops. And if you're going to buy a business in Orbost and you're approached from the northern side and you drove into town and it's bare and empty shops, I think you would think twice about investing in Orbost. And this one at the final on page 5, I mean, what could be more beautiful than that? We don't see that. Bruthen is a busy little town now because it has lovely trees in the street. I don't see anybody wanting to cut them down in Bensdale. So our group especially, and myself personally, are appealing to the councillors to think again. And, you know, the old saying was, when in doubt, say no, because those trees are very, very valuable to the aesthetics of Orbost, the shade. Just let me read this for a minute. Track consultants, who were the consultants, and Fiona was there. I sat out, and Fiona will realise that I sat there with them and listened to what people said. And in their analysis and the feedback on page 30, the general, and I'm quoting, the general consensus was not wanting to modernise the looking streetscape that would take away the shop fronts, architecture and aesthetic character of the landscape. They also said that was on page 30. On page 16, they state, and I quote, that some of the trees should be retained where possible. Now, if you fell all these trees and they've been all felled on the other side, the council has not taken into account the recommendation of the track consultants, which no doubt costs a lot of money for their advice. You just imagine Canberra without trees. You think what Canberra's trees have done for Canberra on a dry, uninteresting landscape, and you go into Canberra in the summer and it's absolutely beautiful. In the last summer, when we would drive into the street during the last summer holidays, it was very evident that people were wanting to find the shade. And all the cars were parked up in the shade. There were people sitting under the shade. And if those trees are gone, where would they go? They would think, well, this is hot and nasty. We'll, you know, go somewhere cooler. So during the past 2 weeks, Gary did refer to the articles in the paper. We were prompted to have a meeting, put this submission to the council, try and get some articles in the paper so that people would become aware of just what is going to happen. And on page 2 there, if you see that photo, sorry, that one in particular, which you've all got, it's bare, it's uninteresting, there isn't any shade, and it doesn't give any aesthetic appeal at all. I think during the past 2 weeks, the number of people that have phoned me up and said, what can we do? I have said, write to the council. And I think, I don't know how many submissions there has been, but I do know there has been quite a lot. And I just don't think the public realise that those trees are going to go. As far as the pavement go, we're suggesting to you that the pavement on that side of the street be left exactly the same level as it is now. It's obviously legal, otherwise it wouldn't be there. Certainly, we realise that the trip hazards, the ups and downs everywhere, all that has to be fixed. And if the leaves are a problem, they could have a non-slip surface. Anywhere, wherever you go, what city around the world, Melbourne, all the way up the coast, you see non-slip surfaces on pavements. And I think that's a very relevant point.
How we going, Wendy? You nearly
Sorry?
Nearly through, are you? You're nearly through your presentation?
Not quite.
That's good. Yeah.
I can't accept that one side should mirror the other, because they're all different, the levels are different, and the trees can be balanced up so that it doesn't look out of place. So it would certainly save a lot of money, and if you're going to award a contract tonight, how can you award a contract when we don't know what's going in there, we haven't been told, we have asked and asked and asked to have it on display in August, which we were told it would be. It hasn't happened. Also, the council said that they would come back to the community with the plans. That hasn't happened. And I would urge the council to do just that and just take a little bit of time to make sure that everybody is aware of what is going to happen. I think it's what you're doing, we really commend the council for wanting to upgrade and make things safe, and that can be done by doing very simple things, by leaving the levels exactly as they are and having a non-slip surface, pick out the trees that are nice shape, where they're up over the verandas in some cases, they can be pruned, selectively pruned, and a lot of people say to me, oh, I wish the council would be a bit more spot on with their maintenance. Mm-hmm. The leaves get blown once a week, they're blown into the gutter, and a gust of wind comes and they blow them back. But if the council spent money on that 1 month and had all the aesthetic value of our town, it would be very beneficial. Orbost is in a rotten place at the moment, without industry and not much prospect of any industry, and we really do need something that's going to last us for lots of years. So we do need to be very, very careful on what we do.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Mayor. Oh,
the eastern side?
No.
On the eastern side?
Oh, sorry.
On the side that you're talking about? That's the eastern side.
I think there are 11 altogether.
11 all up, yeah.
But honestly, if, and I have walked the whole street with Blair and Tino.
Yeah.
And, when we look at it from the other side of the street, if, even if every second one or every third one was lit, it would help. It would help the whole aesthetics of the street. I've been around Orbost probably a lot longer than anyone in this room, and so I've grown up in Orbost. I've lived in Orbost. I was married in Orbost. I had education in Melbourne, so that's really only the 5 years that I've ever been away. And I think we really should take a step back, have a damn good look. Perhaps the councillors could come and look and have a, another talk fest.
Thanks, Wendy. Okay, we need to go into confidential business to discuss a confidential contractual matter. Yes. Yes, please.
Councillors, I so move that, turn this on?
Yes.
I move that we move to in camera, in line, I guess I'm reading this, in line, in respect to section 89 of the Local Government Act, that stipulates, is that what I'm supposed to be reading?
So,
thank you. The council or special committee may resolve that a meeting be closed to members of the public if the meeting is discussing any of the following: A, personal matters; B, personal hardship of any resident or ratepayer; C, industrial matters; D, contractual matters; E, proposed developments; F, legal advice; G, matters affecting security of council; H, any other matters which council or the special committee considers would be prejudice to the council or any person; and I, the resolution to close the meeting to the members of the public. That's different to what I remember reading, but anyway, I so move that.
There is a short version, but
I'm a bit. The contact lenses are a bit sticky after a day, so
it was definitely the long version.
Somebody seconded. Seconded. We had to vote. Had to move.
All those in favour?
So we're going to camera. That's what I basically said.
Against? It's carried. Yeah. Carried.